Hello and welcome. You are listening to the premiere edition of The Deep Dive. And I am incredibly excited to be here with you because we are kicking off something really special today.
We really are. This is it's the start of a marathon, isn't it?
That's right. For the next 26 days, we are going to be dropping a brand new deep dive into your feed every single day. We're going to be exploring some fascinating topics, unpacking complex ideas, and hopefully giving you those insights that just make everything click.
It's going to be quite the journey. We've got so much ground to cover over the next few weeks, spanning all sorts of professional landscapes.
Absolutely. And to get us started, for day one of 26, we are tackling a subject that, let's be honest, usually clears the room at a party. We are talking about data governance. But, and stick with me here, we aren't talking about the boring regulatory checkbox side of it.
No, thankfully not. We're looking at something much more human today.
We're talking about the communication gap. You know the scenario, right? You're in a high-stakes meeting. The technical team starts talking about metadata repositories, schemas, lineage, and you can just see the sales VP's eyes glaze over.
It's the universal struggle. It really is. It's the Tower of Babel problem in the corporate world. You have one side speaking in code and structure, and the other side speaking in revenue and strategy, and that translation layer is just completely broken.
Exactly. So today we are doing a deep dive into a very specific solution to this problem. It's called the Data Governance Analogy Toolkit.
I really enjoyed reviewing this material. It's such a refreshing take because it stops pretending that everyone needs to be a data scientist to, care about data.
The source material we're looking at is essentially a guide, strategic framework, really on how to move data governance from this abstract, scary, technical concept into something tangible for non-technical people.
And that tangible part is so key. The core argument here is that if you can't touch it or visualize it, you can't really value it.
So the toolkit focuses heavily on using analogies. But before we get into the specific examples, and there are some great ones, let's look at the why. The source material uses a very specific word to describe the goal of these analogies. It says the goal is to sensitize the business.
Sensitize. It's a very deliberate choice of words.
It really stopped me in my tracks a bit. Usually in corporate training, you hear educate, inform, upskill. But sensitize, it feels different. Why do you think the author chose that?
Well, think about the difference between information and sensation. Informing is intellectual. I can inform you that the stove is hot, you process that data, you store it, maybe you act on it. But sensitizing is visceral. It's about making someone responsive to a stimulus.
Like a reflex.
Exactly. If you are sensitized to heat, you pull your hand away before you even think about it. The source is arguing that most business stakeholders are, they're numb to data issues. They see a bad report and they just shrug. They aren't sensitive to the danger.
So the goal isn't just to teach them a definition. It's to make them feel the impact.
Precisely. When a stakeholder is sensitized, they understand that bad data governance isn't just an IT ticket they have to file. They feel it as a risk to their bonus, their reputation, or their customer relationships. The analogy is the needle that pierces through that numbness.
That makes so much sense. It sort of bypasses the jargon part of the brain and hits the logic center.
It creates an emotional or a logical bridge. If I tell you our data lineage is broken, you might just nod politely. If I tell you we don't know which farm this poison lettuce came from, you instantly understand the urgency of the problem.
Okay, I love that poison lettuce example. We have to come back to that. But let's look at who we are trying to sensitize here. The source explicitly targets the business and non-technical people.
Which in most organizations is about 90% of the staff.
Right. Marketing, sales, HR, the C-suite. I mean, these are smart people, experts in their fields, but they don't know SQL. And the source implies that the core problem is that without these analogies, these people view data governance as a hurdle.
They see it as red tape. They see the governance office as the Department of No, because in their world, they just want the data to appear on their dashboard so they can make a decision. They don't see all the machinery required to get it there.
So the toolkit is essentially a branding exercise for the data team.
In a way, yes, but it's also a functional tool. It's about alignment. If the head of sales thinks governance is just bureaucracy, they will absolutely bypass it. They'll keep their own secret spreadsheets. But if you use an analogy that makes them see governance as, say, the foundation of their house, they stop digging holes in it.
Let's pivot to the practical side, because this is where the source material gets really, really useful. It doesn't just say, be poetic. It gives specific contexts for using these analogies. It talks about training and awareness campaigns.
And this is a crucial distinction. Training is usually where we just dump a lot of technical information on people.
Here is how you log in. Here's the data dictionary. Good luck.
Yeah. Right, and retention on that is, near zero. The source suggests incorporating these analogies directly into that formal education.
Can we walk through an example of that? Let's say I'm onboarding a new marketing manager. How does the toolkit change that conversation?
Okay, let's take a classic concept. Data quality standards. The technical explanation involves validity checks, null values, formatting rules, and the marketing manager is already asleep.
I'm drifting off just hearing you list them.
Exactly. Now, apply the toolkit. One of the go-to analogies in this space, and the source alludes to this, is the water filter analogy.
Okay, break that down for me.
You tell the marketing manager, imagine our company is a city. The data is the water flowing into the city. Everyone needs to drink it. Data governance isn't rules, it's the filtration plant.
Oh, that's good.
And you ask them, would you drink water straight from a muddy river? No. Would you serve unfiltered water to your customers? Of course not. So why would you send a campaign to a customer address that hasn't been filtered for errors?
And suddenly, the validation rule isn't a nuisance. It's a safety measure.
It completely reframes the relationship. You aren't policing them, you are protecting them from getting sick. That is sensitizing the business.
That fits perfectly with the other context the source mentions, awareness campaigns. This is something I think a lot of technical teams overlook. They think if they build the system, people will just use it.
The field of dreams approach. It rarely works in enterprise software. You have to market the solution.
So how does an analogy drive a campaign?
Well, think about master data management, MDM. It's one of the hardest things to explain to a business. It's basically ensuring you have one golden record for a customer or a product.
Boring.
Incredibly boring, until you call it the GPS.
The GPS.
Yes. This is another classic from the toolkit style. You tell the sales team, right now you are driving a car using a paper map from 1998. You're hitting dead ends. You're driving into lakes. MDM isn't a database. It's upgrading you to a live GPS. It tells you exactly where the customer is right now.
And if the GPS is wrong, you drive off a cliff.
Exactly. So when we ask you to input data correctly, we aren't giving you busy work. We are asking you to help update the map so your colleagues don't crash.
That is what the source means by strategic application. You aren't just improvising these metaphors in the hallway.
Yeah.
You're building a campaign around them. Upgrade your GPS? That's a slogan people can get behind. Implement MDM protocols? Not so much.
It creates a shared language. It becomes part of the company vernacular. When someone sees bad data, instead of ignoring it, they say, hey, the water is muddy or the map is wrong.
It effectively deputizes the entire company into the data governance team.
Which is the only way governance actually scales. You can't hire enough stewards to fix everything. You need the culture to fix itself.
This leads us to the big so what question. The source promises a deeper understanding, but based on what we've discussed, it seems like the goal isn't just understanding, it's action.
You've hit on something important there. The source material explicitly connects these analogies to the real world. It says the goal is to understand how governance is applied in the real world to solve real problems.
Real problems, not theoretical data problems.
Correct. A theoretical problem is this field isn't populated. A real problem is we shipped the product to the wrong address and the customer canceled their contract.
The analogy bridges that gap.
It does. It forces the connection between the abstract and the concrete. Let's go back to that supply chain idea we touched on earlier. This is often used for data lineage, knowing where data comes from.
Right.
To a business user, lineage sounds like ancestry. It sounds like a history project. But if you have a real-world problem, say a financial report is off by $10 million, you have a crisis.
Panic mode.
If you use the supply chain analogy, you explain. We have a contaminated product. We need to know which factory, which truck, and which supplier handled this specific batch so we can recall it.
And if you don't have lineage?
You have to recall everything. You have to shut down the whole factory.
That sounds expensive.
It is. And that's the moment the CFO writes the check for the data governance program, because you've shown them that lineage isn't about drawing lines on a whiteboard. It's about risk containment in the real world.
It's amazing how a simple story can unlock that budget. But here is the challenge I see for our listeners. We are sold on the concept. Analogies are powerful. But coming up with good ones is hard.
It's incredibly hard. And a bad analogy is actually worse than no analogy.
Data is like a cloud because it floats.
Exactly. If the analogy breaks down too quickly, you lose credibility. You look like you don't understand the complexity.
So do we have to be poets to do this job?
Fortunately, no. The source material we're reviewing today is actually pointing us toward a pre-built library. We don't have to invent these from scratch.
This is where the DG specialist comes in.
Right. The source references a creator who goes by the DG specialist, DG for data governance. They've curated these analogies into a toolkit.
And the source mentions a couple of specific channels where people can find this. There's a podcast and a YouTube channel.
It's effectively an open source library of these metaphors. The website is simply dgspecialist.com/podcast.
And the YouTube handle is just at DG Specialist.
What I appreciate about this resource is the invitation the source mentions, listen at any time.
And it sounds simple, but I think there's a strategy in that too.
It suggests an on-demand approach. You don't listen to the whole library at once. You treat it like a reference book.
Right, so I have a meeting with the finance team tomorrow. I'm terrified they won't understand data catalogs.
Exactly. You go to the channel, you search for catalog, and maybe you find an analogy comparing it to a library card catalog or an Amazon search bar. You listen for 5 minutes, you internalize the logic, and you walk into that meeting armed with a story.
It's prep work. It's part of your meeting hygiene.
And it ensures you aren't stuttering through some improvised comparison that doesn't work. You're using a road-tested narrative.
I really like that. It takes the pressure off the individual practitioner to be a genius storyteller every single day.
And it creates consistency. If everyone in your data team uses the same analogies, if everyone talks about the GPS and the water filter, it reinforces the message across the entire company.
So we've covered the sensitization, the training applications, and the resources. But I want to circle back to something you mentioned at the start. You called this empathy.
I did.
Expand on that, because empathy isn't a word we usually associate with data governance. We usually associate it with control.
That's the traditional view. Control, compliance, policing. But if you look at what this analogy toolkit is actually asking you to do, it is asking you to step out of your own shoes.
You have to leave the technical comfort zone.
You have to look at the world through the eyes of a salesperson or a marketing director or a CEO. You have to ask, what are their struggles? What is their mental model of the world?
And then you translate your work into their language.
That is an act of professional empathy. You are respecting their time and their cognitive load enough to make the message accessible.
And I imagine that builds a lot of trust.
It builds immense trust.
Yeah.
When you stop speaking Klingon and start speaking their language, they stop seeing you as an alien. They start seeing you as a partner.
And ultimately, that is the mission of this deep dive. We are trying to help you move from being a data person to being a business partner.
That's the transition. That is how you survive and thrive in the modern organization.
So let's recap the key takeaways from the Data Governance Analogy Toolkit.
Sure. First, stop trying to inform people and start trying to sensitize them. Use analogies to create a visceral reaction to data risks.
Second, operationalize it. Don't just save the good stories for the bar. Put them in your training decks. Build your awareness campaigns around them. Make the analogy the hero of the launch.
Third, connect it to real-world problems. The analogy is the bridge that shows how governance fixes broken reports or lost revenue.
And finally, use the resources. Check out the DG Specialists on YouTube or their site. Build your own personal toolkit so you are never caught speechless in a meeting.
It's a simple set of rules, but it changes the game.
It really does. Now, as we wrap up this first episode of our 26-day sprint,
1 down, 25 to go.
I want to leave the listeners with a final thought to chew on. We've talked a lot about how these analogies help the listener, the business person. But what does using these analogies tell us about the speaker?
That's something I've been reflecting on. There's a concept often attributed to Einstein or sometimes Feynman, the idea that if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough yourself.
That hits home.
I think it's a litmus test for data professionals. If you find yourself hiding behind jargon, if you can't explain data lineage without using the word metadata, then maybe you don't actually understand the business value of what you're doing.
That is a tough pill to swallow.
It is. But the effort to find the analogy, to find that water filter or that GPS, forces you to strip away the fluff and find the core truth of the concept. It makes you better at your job, even if you never say the analogy out loud.
So the challenge for our listeners today is, look at your current project. Can you explain it to your grandmother? Can you explain it to a teenager? If not, get back to the drawing board.
Exactly. Or get back to the toolkit.
Right. Well, on that note, we are going to sign off. Thank you so much for joining us for the premiere of the Deep Dive. This has been a blast.
It has a great start to the journey.
Make sure you are subscribed because we are back tomorrow with day 2. We're keeping this momentum going, and trust me, the topics only get more interesting from here.
Looking forward to it.
Check out the toolkit, practice your analogies, and we will see you tomorrow.
See you then.